Well, hello everyone. Welcome. I think we'll get started. My name is Stephen Mattisio. I'm the director and the chief curator at the Blaffer Art Museum, and we're so pleased that you can join us today. These are kind of unusual circumstances. We have an artist visiting from France whose show was supposed to open today, and then the whole supply chain, port of entry, delays in shipment and transport, essentially have her sculptures traveling somewhere to Houston. We're not exactly sure where they are at this point. But Carolyn and her partner Martin are in town, and so we're so glad that you can join us so that she can give this artist talk and that we can in some ways provide this precursor to an exhibition that we hope will open sometime next week. But we will update all of you on that, the status. So I'm going to give a little introduction and then turn the microphone over to Caroline. So Caroline Mesquita grew up in Brittany, completed her BFA in Rennes, and then studied at the Beaux-Arts in Paris and now lives and works in Marseille, France. She creates wonderfully carnivalesque installations and tableaux marrying metal, video, sculpture, and cut paper, and won the 19th Fondation Richard Prize in 2017. Selected solo exhibitions include the Municipal Gallery in Porto, the Centre Pompidou in Paris, 221A in Vancouver, and 1 meter cubed in Lausanne, amongst many others. She attended the Mountain School of Arts in Los Angeles in 2014 and then conducted a road trip to Marfa, Texas, driving through Arizona and New Mexico along the way. And I think that's the only time you've been in the United States prior to this.
Yeah.
We are so pleased and honored to welcome her back to the US, and we want to give enormous thanks to the French-American Cultural Exchange and the État Donné Contemporary Art Foundation, who provided very crucial support for this exhibition, as well as the cultural services of the French Embassy in the United States. I approached Caroline before the pandemic, and I want to thank her personally for her patience and perseverance. As you can imagine, it has been an entirely new realm of challenges to plan a show during this series of events. And we were not even sure that Caroline would be able to be here in person. As you know, the borders just opened up on November 8th. So while her sculptures left France nearly 2 months before she did, the inundated ports of entry and delays in shipping and warehouse storage mean that her show will officially open at a slightly later date. But we now have the opportunity to set the context and build anticipation, as Caroline will walk us through past projects and the path that led her to Noctambules, her first solo exhibition in the United States. Please welcome Caroline Mesquita.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for your introduction and for your invitation. And thank you for being here today. I'm Caroline Mesquita. I'm 32 years old and I'm French. I grew up in France, in Brittany, which is an area on the west part of France, on the west coast, in the countryside. So I started my art school, as Stephen said, in Rennes, and then I finished in Paris, and I'm now living in Marseille, and I'm working between Marseille and Brittany. So that's voilà. So I started working with metal when I was in art school. I really wanted to learn a technique, so I spent hours trying things with metals. So here is my website. So I will follow the images on my website. So you can find it online if you want to watch it again after this talk. So if you want to go after, you can click, and there are bigger images and sometimes some more images. And now I'm on the last project. I'm adding also some text to present a bit more the projects. So here is my very first shows, which was in 2013. It was in Switzerland. And I think that's how I started to use metal. When I was in art school, I was really much more interested into, let's say, immaterial art. I was interested into the question of around the work of art. What can a work of art be? Like it can be a painting, a sculpture, but also a performance and also something immaterial. So I was like trying things with light, for example, or like a heater. And I started during this test at school, I started to use furniture. And I think that was the very beginning of my relation with metal. Because at some point I was using this furniture and I was thinking that it would be good to be able to create myself some sort of furniture, which becomes more and more after that sculptural objects. So that's how I came to metal. Sorry for my English, huh? I'm doing my best. But if I'm not clear enough, you can like just ask me a question. I will try to precise. And so that's how I started to use metal. And because it was really close to some very industrial and very familiar common objects. And also something I liked a lot with metal, it was possibility to transform forever a piece made of metal. For example, if you use a tube of metal, you can cut it, you can weld it, but if you don't like the form, you can always like meld it again and make another object from it. And I think this was really important to me. This idea of eternal possibility or eternal transformation. For example, with a piece of wood, you have to, like, it takes a long time to grow, so it's kind of precious, and when you use it, if you don't make the right thing, it's over, right? I mean, you can always transform it, but it's kind of over. So yeah, that's what I like a lot with metal. So here, it's the very first installation. I think, yeah. So I'm a sculptor, but my exhibition, my sculptures are always very related to the space. I really try to create environment, like specific environment. So when people get into the exhibition, they really meet something, like meet a situation that they will never meet again. So I'm trying to make this moment a bit special. And voilà, so that's, and in this very first exhibition, it was like a sort of big drawings made of metal in a space, like a drawing made of, I was doing like some furniture, like creating an environment. So that's a very beginning. Yeah, there is something which is quite important for me, and I think it's related to the idea of the eternal transformation. I used to be a musician when I was younger, and at a point when I was working in my studio, I realized that I could also make some sound from my metal tubes, and I like the idea that a sculpture could also become, so it could be a material object, but it could also become a sort of immaterial object, like it could produce sound. So it could be at the same time a sculpture, a visual sculpture, but a sound sculpture. And I started to give a second life to my sculptures, so I'm using them as instruments. So here it's a flute, so it really works, actually. I use the scratch from the studio, and I make the holes like aleatory. So each flute I made has a very different sound and, how do you say, tonality. And so around, so there is, this one is an instrument, and this one too. And this one is a drum. So before the opening, I use this stick to play on the drum, and I record the sound. It's really like a deep sound. It's really like it sounds like a suspense sound, a bit like when you watch a movie. And I record the sound, then I fixed again, weld the stick to the drum, and I have speakers installed around the drum, so you can really hear the instrument. I think it's not obvious to relate the sculpture to the sound, but I think that's also quite nice. Voilà. That's another exhibition where I tried to find another way to reuse my sculpture. I think some of the, I realized that when I was in art school, like we were a lot, some people making sculptures, and I think there were sort of two kind of people. Some people were producing and wanted to keep all of their sculpture, like really like very precious objects. And I was working a lot on some sculptures, but when they were done, I didn't really wanted to keep them. So I wanted to make something new from them. And so that's how I also started to use them as kind of a machine to make print. My pronunciation is not good, but so here it's a sort of bass made of copper with woman figure grave on it and oxidized. If you oxidize the copper, it becomes a green. And then with water, I use this big sculpture to make prints on paper. And I create this sort of phantomatic bodies all around this object. So the green one are made from the copper and the brown one from the steel. So here, I don't know if you know Kandinsky, but he has this book, I can't remember the name, but I think it's interesting because he talks around about the point which become a line and which become a surface. And I think I have the same sort of logic in my development. I started with some drawings on paper, and then I used these metal tubes that you saw at the very beginning, because for me it was really like to make drawings in the space, to make spatial drawings. And then I had these lines, and I was like, okay, maybe I could use plates. And so I started to use this plate, to use these plates and to create volume from them. So this is a sculpture made of brass plates. And there is something special, which is that all the colors you see come from the oxidization of the brass. For example, when you go outside and you see a statue, a public sculpture made of bronze or brass, sometimes it gets green. And this color comes from the natural oxidation of the sculpture, which is outside in the rain. But if you oxidize bronze with other chemical products like ammoniac, chlorhydric acid, you can have many other colors. So I started to try in my studio. And I think, yeah, for me it was also another way to make these sculptures talk, like the sound, like the print, or to make them exist. For me, it was like, because these are naked bodies, and I wanted, it was like a, how do you say transpiration in English? Like when sweating. And yeah, so that's not painting, that's really just chemical reaction. So it's just a transparent product, and when you put it on a brass or copper, whatever, sometimes it even makes smoke, so it's kind of magical. And after like a few hours, a few days, there is a color which appears. And these are photographs of the characters, the human figures, before the oxidation. So it was a way also to make this figure exist at different periods of time, like the past of this sculpture and now the present. Voilà. So that's a bit of the same thing, but on big tables made of brass, entirely made of brass, with print on fabrics, and I also use the dust. When you cut the brass, you get this golden dust, and I wanted to use it. Here are windsurfers. So I did work on these flat human bodies, and at a point I was like, okay, maybe I could make volume from this plate. And voilà, here on the first test. I don't tell the story of all projects because it's gonna take too long, so just a little bit. No, maybe this one. So here you can really see like the human figures again, but made of volume, very kind of geometrical volumes. It was in a gallery in Italy called Spazio Ha, and I wanted to recreate a kind of like if you enter a gallery and you face an opening, like a permanent opening. Or like a mondain moment, like mundanity meeting. At the time I was really like, I was spending a lot of time to the Louvre, and I was looking a lot at Rubens or Velázquez or these painters who were related to country and who were supposed to paint a very important and historical moment of the royal family, for example. So to represent the maximum you say beautifulness of a moment. And yeah, so I was really inspired by this kind of representation of a group of people. Yeah, I want to come back to the group too. Most of the time I'm showing group of sculptures, and I think that's something really important to me, because I like the rapidity when I'm producing, even if it takes time because it's metal and it's quite a production. I do it when I describe my sculpture. Let's say they are human-size brass figures. it could be the same technical description as a public statue. But here's the difference, it's not cast, because when you cast a statue, you have to make the first one, to cast. It's a long process, an expensive process, and that's really not what I am interested in. I prefer the rapidity, to be very close to the idea and to the intuition. And I prefer also, rather than to make one sculpture with many details, I prefer to make more and to move from a question about like one individual expression. I prefer to move to a group integration and to a group scene. I don't know if I'm clear. Also, something which is very important to me is the human size aspect. I like that the objects I represent are real size objects. Like, for example, for human figure, like when you get into a show, you really like they are not presented on pedestal, so there is no distance between the sculpture and the visitor. So you really like find yourself in the middle of these human figures. So there is a statu quo between you and them, and also there is no special distance, security distance between them. So you can go in the middle of the group, but you will get really close to them. You really sometimes like have to make you small to get inside of this group. But that's also important to me, like to try to change the relation that you can get to a sculpture, to an art object. Yeah, it's important to me. And ouais. So here it's what. Also, in the previous project I showed, I was really like working on naked bodies, and here it's more about like clothes, and only clothes actually, because you don't see any like arms, hands. It's only like it's also a sort of collection of clothes, like a fashion show. Okay. That's what in a sort of a party for the Ricard Prize, they invited me to make some sculptures for the party, and I was like, I don't know, it was interesting to me to put these sculptures into such a context. So yeah, this piece is quite important for me because it's a turn, I think, into my practice. So this is a big installation. The figures are human-sized figures, so it's quite big. Here it's outside scene. You see the wall, and there are these, like, I think there were like 13 figures around, and there is this woman on the wall. And I was, for this sculpture, I was really interested into some feminine revolution figures. And I produced these pieces for a fair in Berlin, and I worked like 3 months in a studio in the storage of my gallery. And the fair was only on for 2 days, and I wasn't there during the fair. And when I came back to Berlin, I found all these sculptures installed in the storage of my gallery, but in very little group. And when I arrived, I thought it was very interesting, because it was like to find them in a backstage moment, in little group, where they were like sort of talking or exchanging like if they had their own personal life. And I think I already had this feeling before. because sometimes as an artist you spend like months alone at the studio working, like maybe sometimes it's a bit a strange life, because when you open a show you meet people and you go to the opening, it can be fancy, but most of the time you are alone in your studio, a bit like you don't say that in English, a garagist, like I'm welding and grinding all the time, so it's really different. And when I'm alone in my studio, I'm surrounded of these figures I made, and sometimes I realize that I started like talking to them, like you could talk to your cat, or like sometimes you have some affection for an object, you don't know why you find me nice, and okay, it's weird, but and I was okay. As an artist, I think this feeling is something important to develop, to push, and maybe to talk about. And I think that was the moment to start. And so after this, because this scene is really like all the figures are fixed, so it's really like a petrified moment, very theatrical. So, and after that, I was invited for a show in Brussels, and I decided to make a movie with these figures. And I think that's also really linked to what I talked at the very beginning, when I started to use my sculptures as instrument or as machine to make prints, is to give like a third or another life again, another possibility of existence to these sculptures. And so I did make this new group of sculptures, but these ones were animated. That means that I could move every part of them. And I make my first animation movie in my studio. In this video, it's really like me producing my sculpture at the studio. So I'm really like wearing, but here there is you see me in my blue suit. And so you see me with the sculptures, and yeah, it's really the artist and creations. And also I started to make very big paper background to shoot this video. Here you see some images of the video. So in this video you really see the making, because you see the sculptures naked of gold, and then you see the first like apparition of bodies, and then you see the clothes, so you see kind of the process. That's my first outdoor commission in Edinburgh in Scotland. And so that's the second video, and in the first video I was like, okay, it's very comfortable for me, because I'm myself, and I'm showing my sculpture like naked and evolving and changing. And I was like, okay, in the second one I'm gonna reverse, and there will be only 5 sculptures. And me, but I will be playing many characters. And I think I think I understood it later, but I think it's really related to the reason why I use metal, about this possibility of eternal transformation. I think also I was in my 20s, and in your 20s you don't really like, you build yourself, you don't know yet exactly like who you are, you have to make choice, and you think about regret, about you're like making yourself. And also I think I started to make shows and to meet people during openings, and to have my place in the art world. And I think this world was so different from the world I come from. I come from from a blue-collar family. So for me it was another world. And I was thinking about this possibility, this, in English, I think it's right to say like a trans-class travel possibility, about like destiny, all these questions. So I think that's also why it was important for me to make it myself in many different characters. So and also I was I was asleep in this video, or like almost like sleeping. So the sculpture were acting on me, were like moving me. So it was to really like reverse the relationship between them and I. This was a show in Paris, but a two-parts show, because the first part was in Paris and the second one was in Vancouver. And so this is a part of an airplane. So I made this in my studio. And this is an installation with an old story about a plane and a crashed plane, we don't know where. And in the movie, you meet all the people who were in this plane. So you see the pilot, you see the mechanic. You see the steward, and you see many passengers. So I played all the people, and then meet this creature. We don't know where, and so it's a whole story about this crash. In animation still, so image per image. So these are motorbikes prototypes. Yeah, I think I was working on these human figures, and I think at what point, as a sculptor, it was also I wanted to create other kind of objects, so like the plane, the motorbikes, because I think as a sculptor, you really like look at all the objects. Can be a regular object, but you look at, I think like everyone like the cars, motorbike, and I was like, okay, as a sculpture, it's cool because I can propose like, I did propose 4 prototypes of motorbikes, but I did not have any like, I could do, there was no motorization, so I could do whatever form I like to do. This is a show, it looked quite different, but I think it really follows the idea of the plane, of the motorbikes, and I think it's also linked to what I said before about like the possibility to escape from a social destiny. I think that was also this engine which helps you like to travel, move, escape. And here it's a show when I proposed like 5 prototypes of spaceships. This show was actually quite intense for me because so I had this idea in mind, like to propose a new prototype of spaceship. So I was looking at a lot of movie, comics, reading a lot like science fiction. To get an idea of what have been like proposed until here, and so I started drawings. And when I went to the studio and started making the forms, I realized that my drawings were really inspired from forms which has already been proposed, and forms that we all have in mind, this common imagination that we have. And I really pushed myself. I wanted something like special new forms. And and so it was quite a long process because I started to realize my drawing, and I was like, okay, no, everyone can recognize a form from this film or this comics, and so I had to like cut them, change the position many times to finally make these 5 prototypes. So they are sort of like an abstract form on which there are some elements, figurative elements, like I don't know in English, like a volant. Ah ouais. So enfin, voilà. That's a.
Yeah. Can you talk about that one?
This one? Yeah, was a way to. This is a two parts project which was shown in between Lisbon and Porto in Portugal. So this is the first part. It was the first time for me to have this opportunity to make a 2 parts project. Usually you have to say everything on one project. So it was interesting for me. So here is the first part. So it was quite a big installation. We created this fake floor made of brass, of marble, with this hole and this big engine machine inside of it, like if it was there for forever, and suddenly it breaks and this big machine appear, and we don't know how it from where it from when it is. And so it was this mute landscape with no indication. So spectator was just like visiting this surprising environment. And in the second part, that's the second part in Porto. So you can recognize the machine, the bones. My idea was to talk about this move, this change between the place and the moment when you find an old object, like in archaeological research, for example, where they find like bones or whatever object, they found it like in the ground, in the dust. They have no property, they have no history, we don't know what they are, and they have no value yet. And then we take this object and we present them in some places like museum, and we build a whole story around them. Like we project many ideas, things on them, and they have a value. Suddenly they became like super precious, and they will never like touch the dust or the ground anymore. And I really wanted to create this move and to talk about it. And so here you see like the machine, the bones inside of vitrine, and you have a video which has been shot here. And there is a whole story which happened inside of this first exhibition. And actually this idea comes from the previous show here, which was in Switzerland during the Art Basel fair. So they have the program, so there is a main big fair, and there is a program where they invite artists to present some project into some specific old spaces, and they invite me to show some pieces inside of this old museum with wood sculptures. And the particularity of this museum is that they show very old wood sculpture with vitrine. So there is really there is no glass between your eyes and the sculptures, no reflection. And so they invite me, and I was working with the very strict Swiss conservateur. And when we arrived 2 days before the opening with the shipper in front of the church, because it's in a big church at the center of Basel, they stopped the sculpture and said, no, we cannot let the sculpture get inside because there is resin on them to protect the oxidation. And potentially after 23 degrees, the resin could liberate some molecule toxin which could damage the whole art pieces. So I thought, okay, what can we do? And they finally found these big vitrines to protect the sculpture from my sculptures. And and so that was quite funny because that was exactly the opposite of the museum ideas. And my sculpture were really new, were maybe 2 months old, and they were protected, but not as precious objects, but as dangerous objects. So that I like a lot. And also it was because I also shown a video where you see these 2 hands like this one moving, and I thought it was like a double deactivation of this alive sculptures, like a bit like a science fiction movies when you see human bodies inside of glass boxes sleeping for hours, for years before they get to another planet. So. And I really like this idea of that the sculptures can be dangerous. To reverse this relation that we usually have in a museum, that we have to protect the people from the object. Actually, it's linked to a show that I saw in Brittany, in a place in Brittany, and I visited this show and I found that the scenography was really weird. It was a show about I'm gonna forget the word. Voodoo, so powerful objects, and it was really weird because there are some steel plates, a mirror, and I was like, okay, that's super strange, but okay, these objects are really interesting. And at the end, I got the text, and I realized that all this installation was made to protect the visitor from the object for the potential negative power. And so I think that's also something which inspired me. And in this here in this video, you understand that these bones can get alive through some water. So you understand that the vitrines are here to protect you from them.
So with this one, you built a false floor. So there was the floor of the gallery, and then you built a floor above it, and then put the object.
Yeah.
Okay, and then people could walk on.
Yeah. It's real mobile. So it's really like you. I remember there was even an architect coming to the opening. He was like, "How did you do? You really do." No, it was really. Ouais. Okay, that's also another important piece for me because it's a piece made of cardboard, and actually that's a practice I have in my studio. I used to have not really anymore, but just sometime. But when I to prepare my exhibition, because brass can be quite expensive, so. Usually I used to make the brass figure or some other sculptures in paper or cardboard to try the size, the form, and to understand how it physically works. And I always saw that it was strange not to show this object and only to show the precious object made of brass. And I always saw that I could be a potential new practice to me, because it will allow me to produce even bigger installation for cheaper price, and so it could I could develop something new. So that is the first one. So it's only cardboard. This is the second one. This house is made of cardboard too, with some metal sculptures. And this is the last show. It was in Sao Paulo in Brazil, and it was a sculpture architecture made of crumbled paper, with a video shown inside. I'm quick because I think it's time soon, so maybe.
Yeah, we could probably wrap up in a couple minutes and then ask some questions.
Okay. So here, okay. So the human body is really present in my work. I think it's important for me to talk about the human. And so you have seen the naked body, then the bodies made of clothes, then the bones, because for me it was really important because it's a structural aspect of humans' bodies, and that also what exists after our death, what survive. And here in this project I wanted to talk about the inside of our body, like the inside microscopic landscape. So I looked at a lot of video of many cells, like it can be, here you see a white globule and a red globule on the plaquette. Here it's a virus, there is a cancer cellule, there is a flora intestinal. So there is many like tableaux. And so in the show, you get inside of one of the cellules that you will meet into the video. But when you get into the show, you don't really understand. It has this big form. And when you go on the back, you see that there is a hole here. So curious people will get in. And you arrive inside of this landscape, and you see the video, and you understand that you are inside of one of the cell which is in the video. And in the video I worked I worked on some costumes. So this project is all made of paper and cardboard and like plastic bash, so very cheap things that you can find. And so all the costume. And I work with two dancers because I decided to make sculptural costumes, so to think more about the sculpture rather than the costume. So I think it was very difficult costume to wear and to move with. But I think that's also how it gets interesting, because I worked with two girls and they were really like moving in a very difficult way, and that's also what gives this feeling of microorganisms moving in a weird way. And yeah, so and it starts with this chirurgical scene. So you see the scene, and you get inside of the body when it's opened, and yeah, it's a travel inside of a human body.
Can you tell us a little bit about what we'll see at the Blaffer?
Ah oui, ah oui. So at the Blaffer, you will see a body of 6 new sculptures. You will see a new video inside of the installation. And in this video, so in some previous video, I was like acting or playing all the characters, and at one point I started to work with people because I wanted to. It was difficult for me to choose the images before and then to be inside of the images, so I started to use models inside of my videos. And it happened during one of the videos that when I showed the video, people thought that it was me inside of the video, and I found this very interesting. And I started looking for a sosie. Does it work in English? Sosie. Someone looking very simple.
Like a doppelganger?
Doppelganger, ouais. And so I made a video with this girl who is really looking like me, and it's about a night, about a dream of a sculpture of the sculptor with sculptures. Sorry, I'm losing my English. That's a small introduction. Do you want to add anything about this?
Well, you're calling it night creatures, or night noctambules.
Noctambule. Noctambule is a word in English, in French, but I like it a lot, and so I kept it. Do you have a question?
Noctambule is sleepwalking, and that someone who walks
And no, it's not really sleepwalking.
No.
No.
Is it an invented musical structure?
What?
An invented musical structure is the idea, because so much of the work seems, as you just mentioned, there are dancers involved, that there's something theatrical about the work.
Yeah. Now, yes, she's because there is this thing in my video, because I like to have the sculptures acting on a human body. So all of the time, I find a way to make the human body unanimate. So a crash plane crash, or they are just sleeping. So here she's sleeping, or maybe she's dreaming, and these sculptures happy around her.
The word noctambule in France is maybe just someone living or working on doing stuff at night.
Where doing stuff, living at night, where? The only tradition I found was night owls.
Oh, interesting.
What? Night birds. Someone living at night, where?
What material did you use to do the sculptures for this exhibition?
These sculptures are made of metal, ouais. Brass, and one of them is made of stainless steel and aluminium, but the other ones are made of brass, oxidated brass.
Are you continuing the practice of reusing sculptures, like with the cardboard ones, or because your work is quite large, and so do those works get stored in a warehouse somewhere or a studio, or do they get reused and reanimated?
That's a good question. Yeah, because I think that became a problem to me at one point, because I'm doing this big installation, like the huge plane and these spaceships, and I don't sell that much pieces, also because I think I make installations, so it's difficult to consider a one piece without the group and without a video. So I think it can be difficult sometimes to collector. So I store a lot of my pieces in my studio in Brittany, and my gallery stored a lot of my pieces too. But it started to be a problem actually, because it costs to store, it costs to ship, and it costs to produce. So, because we have, for example, as a painter, or when you have other practice, it can avoid all this problematic. And I think this new production made of cardboard and papers are also sort of a solution, because they are ephemeral. So just made for one presentation, and I like to imagine them as mirage. So you have the chance to see them only once, then they disappear, and that also resolves my problem of storage.
Did you find yourself having to defend brass as a material? It's in the contemporary art world.
To defend it as a material?
Yeah.
Not really. I think people kind of like.
Respond to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's shiny, it's gold, it's
Yeah.
sexy. You know? No, I don't know. I think it's more and more used actually with artists. I mean, it has been always used, metal and bronze and brass, but you see it.
But maybe less so as a kind of, you use it almost as if it were paper, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a different use where I don't like cast. I found my way to use it. I'm not really good at drawing, and I'm not really good at. I'm skirting. If I use clay, for example, I don't feel really comfortable. I feel much comfortable with this plate, with these geometrical forms. Also, there is kind of a physical body relation, because they are big, and it's a big physique, and I think that's my way of working.
I ask because there's a kind of interesting contrast between two types of work. There's one that's very joyful and playful in your work, and then one that's almost industrial and futuristic.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I think that's also true. When you see the exhibition, there is something very joyful and something a bit not intriguing, but a bit like how do you say? There is like some sort of two faces, like something. It seems like maybe anxious, and an anxious way of seeing this show, and a very joyful way of seeing them. I think so. Yeah.
Sorry, I came a little late, so I'm not sure if anyone's already asked this or anything, but sorry. So I came a little late, so I'm not sure if anyone's already asked this, but it's kind of like two things, I guess. First one is, out of like the materials you use, is there any ones that you feel like help express the like emotion or like the art better like this?
I think I didn't get the question.
Sorry.
No, maybe it's me. Huh?
What material do you use that you feel expresses your thinking best? What material do you use?
I think metal is my main material. I mean, I use paper and cardboard a lot, but at the same time, paper and cardboard are easy to make models, like small objects. But then when it gets to bigger object, it doesn't have the same force. So it's not easy to make that stand.
More, I think what you meant on the emotional level. If I may, it's more that with metal also you can, if you use brass, you can have something super shiny and sexy as you say, but then if you oxidize it, suddenly you can look like something old or.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's why I guess this is why you use it as well, because you have this spectrum of
Yeah.
emotions to it.
Yeah, that's right.
Following up a little, do you start with the material or do you start with the idea, because some of them have a complex kind of storytelling aspect too. So how much do you plan, like what the scene is going to be, and then how does that dictate which materials you use, and how does that back and forth work?
I think that I'm pretty. I have a clear idea of what the show is going to be. It's getting more and more precise to me. It used not to be, because when you start as an artist, you try things and you get more and more precise. Now when I start working on a show, I get some a floor plan and some photos of the show, and I'm trying to imagine what will be possible. It's also depend on the budget, so there is a very basic things like what is the budget, how is the space, and what can I do, because all this production can cost a lot. So very pragmatic thing, and then when I see the space, I can understand how big can the installation be, and how good it would look. How can I invent an installation made for the space? Because I like this impression when you see an exhibition, it's like if it's made for the space. So I try to understand what can be the best option, and then I think about an idea, like a subject that I will turn around, and about an installation. Should I make like just sculptures? Can I make sculptures and a video? And how can I develop around that? But when I'm working on the sculpture, I like to be quite free. I know the general idea. I know that I will produce like a body of sculpture and a video, and I know the topic. But then when I get into production, it's important to have freedom and to. I like to keep a sort of experimentation. I think it's important to let you drive by the material too, because sometimes you say, okay, I'm going to do this sculpture this way, but it just physically doesn't work. So it's also you have to accept that, and also to let the sculpture arrive as it has to arrive in a certain way. Sometimes there is just something magical and obvious. It's like when you're going in a museum, some like painting on obvious for everyone. So I'm trying to reach this thing during the production to make them happy. And I think, if I come back to the previous question, I think metal is really important to me, because this idea of transformation is really the key. And I think, for example, I like this example during the war. They decided to melt all the bronze to make some arm, a cannon, and I like to think that they can have another existence in the second life, or that it can always change. So I think I like that. Alchemy. Ouais. Yeah, exactly.
Caroline, do you look at, like, I'm thinking about the sort of more theatrical quality of the settings and the tableau and the arrangement. And I thought like of Commedia dell'arte and these sort of like, it's sort of like a theater that sort of has rough edges to it. And I was thinking, like, you've obviously moved into video and a sort of stop motion animation, but have you thought, like, has that ever the sort of idea of a theater setting or something sort of like where actors would move through in like a live situation? Or
If I would like to,
if you would ever sort of think about that in your future of your work, or if that could go there.
I did try some things, but actually I realized that for example, for the video I did in Porto for the 2 parts project, it was a video with, I think there were like 4 dancers, and like 2 people helping me, but I realized that it was a bit too much. That the video started with me alone in my studio with the sculptures, and it was going too far from the very beginning of that, and I didn't really felt good in this situation while I was making, because the video is like the sculptures. I have a synopsis, I have like all the background, I have the scene and the action, but I like to have freedom inside of this moment of creation. And I think I didn't feel comfortable with many people around me. And yes, in certain way, I like to, for now on, I like to keep it small, and also to get close in the video to one body, to one sculpture, to get into some details. Yeah. And I like simple narration too, because it's not really narration, it's like a situation, all the video on one situation, and inside of this situation some things happen, but it's one situation. And I think I don't know if I would be good into developing stories. Sometimes you try that. Merci à vous.